And Sean, you've been very involved really in helping others to learn the skills of teaching, as it were, and nurturing others. What kind of developments do you think you've seen over the period of time that you've been involved in teaching development?
Certainly when I started, teaching was a very private activity. I think that's probably the single biggest transformation. People simply didn't talk about their practice. They didn't talk about... What they talked about in the common room at lunch was their research. They didn't talk about their teaching. They didn't go to each other and say, you know, I've got this lecture I give every year and it doesn't work. There was very little of that. It was teaching was something very, very private. And so what I have noticed is that there is an increasing openness, an increasing willingness to discuss practice. That's been partly motivated, I think, by the explosion in the scholarship of teaching and learning as a phenomenon. And people do feel an ability to engage and feel like they've been given permission to engage. I think also some of that has been top-down, and sometimes top-down is needed. Certainly one of the ways in which that privateness changed in my institution was because there was some top-down change, that people said we have to think about the program. What does it mean to be a major in history? Well, we didn't really know, because all we did was we taught our course. There was no one who had responsibility for saying what did we produce at the other end. We had a student for 14 weeks and then they went off to another course, and that was our involvement. So it was almost by pure serendipity that the student did enough courses that they felt that they were a historian or historically trained, more correctly, at the end of it. So I think that is a big change. So a lot of the change in teaching and learning really has been a product of the need to do more with less. The reality is we've been dealt a hand and we're trying to make the best of it. There are a lot of lemons. The lemonade is it's getting sweeter each year, but you know, for many of us, it's still not very palatable.
Thinking about your own experience as a teacher and also your experience helping others to teach, what constructive advice would you give yourself if you were right back at the beginning again, you know, starting over?
It seems to me the case that if I was going for a job today with the qualifications I had 15, 16 years ago, there's no way in the world that I would ever get a job. These people are being asked to, you know, when I first got a job, a contract for a book was sufficient evidence of research capability. Now we want base grade lecturers have 2 or 3 books. You know, people used to go through an entire academic career with maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 books if they were lucky. The demands we're putting on these students is incredibly intense, and I just wonder how they can maintain it. And I mean, I have seen cases recently of young academics who burn out. The stress becomes too great, and I really wonder, therefore, can we see their passion, or is their passion, have they had to put their passion in a drawer just to meet the hurdles that they have to jump through? And I think that's the really interesting thing. And where do they get the time to be a human being? I mean, okay, they become an academic and they keep writing books, that's fantastic. But, you know, my generation, or even probably the generation before me, is a better example. You know, they had a life beyond academia. You know, they might have been a classical pianist or an amateur filmmaker or a public intellectual. They contributed to society in a whole number of ways. This current generation are much more focused on these academic research outcomes. And so that has really significant impacts on teaching and learning. What I find is they're really interested in engaging in teaching and learning, but they're also getting a counter message that says you need to write that next book if you want to get a job or promotion, or et cetera, et cetera. So it is difficult for them because, and in my current role where I'm attempting to facilitate with these young people, I often do find myself saying, they come to me and saying, I want to engage, I want to apply for a teaching and learning research grant. And I say, look, you're thinking about getting promoted now. I'm sorry, that it's probably that book that's going to get you there. It's the reality. I'd love you to do that teaching and learning grant, but that's me and the institution saying, well, that'll be good for us, rather than what's good for you. And so that tension, I think, is not good. And also it's dangerous because it does become a box ticking exercise. I have to engage with scholarship for teaching and learning because that's the way I'm going to get promoted. And so they engage with it in a very functional sense. Whereas, thinking back to my own engagement, it was based on a desire and a need and an urge, not just a desire that, if I look at what you need to get promoted, I need to have written a scholarly article in SOTA. So, I do have grave concerns about the way in which the system is throttling the passion and the love out of these younger academics. And I think my generation and the generation that are just reaching a retirement age, our mentoring role really has to be, I think, to bring back that love and passion and have those conversations. It's really interesting, again, just looking at my own institution. When I first became an academic there, the common room at lunchtime was full of people. Discussion was fantastic. It was a privilege to be there. These days, maybe myself and two other colleagues are in the common room. Why aren't the young academics in the common room? Because they don't have time. They're too busy writing. The workload's increased. Marking has become the bane of many academics' existence, because we designed an assessment philosophy and practice that existed back in that 6 to 8 period, and now they're marking 25. But we haven't changed anything. We just expect they'll mark that number of essays. So you can see they get burnt really quickly.
And I can see the tension also, going back to that question about what advice would you give yourself. And you answered it in a way, Sean, when you said, sometimes you're engaged now with advising younger lecturers and younger teachers and saying, well, you might really want to go for that teaching scholarship grant, but actually what might work better for you is to go for this research grant. So are there any ways, do you think, maybe, through communities of practice or whatever, that we can actually help to, nurture or at least try to help people become resilient, to maintain that passion?
I've just said that I fear that the passion and the love is getting throttled out of them. But if they're jumping through these incredible hoops and working so hard, the passion must be there.
Yes.
Why would you do this? I mean, when I first got my academic job, people would come and say to me, "What do you do for a living?" And I'd say, "I don't work for a living. I do what I love," and it just happens that some organisation pays fortnightly into my bank account some money. I really did used to feel that this was just, it wasn't work. It wasn't work, and because it wasn't work, because I didn't feel it was a job, writing a lecture at 2 o'clock in the morning that I had to deliver at 9 o'clock the next day didn't feel particularly onerous. And so my fear is, I don't know the degree to which a young academic today still feels the same way when they've got so many demands being placed upon them. And so again, that's my fear, that we're asking too much of these young academics, and the result is, again, using a teaching and learning comparison, they become surface learners, not deep learners, in everything they do, because they just feel they've got to get over this hurdle.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add, bearing in mind that this would be seen by people who will be interested in you and your work, but also in the practice of teaching? I
mean, you use the word community of practice, which is certainly a big idea and approach, and I think that's really the key, that ability to share. And again, maybe for this generation, those old legacies of teaching as being something that was very, very private may have gone. But if it hasn't gone, it's the clearest way to improve your practice, to remain energised. And I mean, it is the case that I sometimes wonder if, under the pressures that students face these days, that their passion is that the passion of teaching history is actually a chemical reaction. The passion of the student encounters the passion of the academic to produce something. And so take away either of the ingredients and one wonders whether the reaction is going to take place. And I sometimes do fear that, again, in an increasingly complex world where the cost of education is dramatically increasing. I mean, we're just seeing that discussion now in the United Kingdom. In Australia, it's been going on for some time. The degree to which university is not the core of a 18 to 21-year-old's existence. It was interesting. We have a wellness survey that's done for the students. It's been done for many years at UNSW. And one of the interesting indicators was a question essentially around who are your friends? And 15 years ago, a second-year student would say, well, my friends are the students in my courses. The friends I've met at university. Today, more often the students say, well, my friends are the people I went to school with, because I still live at home because I can't afford to move out. How many days are you on campus? I'm on campus about 2 days a week. I go to the library, I do a lecture, I go home. That's because I work 25 hours a week flipping burgers in McDonald's. So that opportunity for students to be passionate and engaged, it does seem to me that there will always be passionate students, but it seems to me that as a percentage of the cohort, that percentage, those students are decreasing. And I mean, it's interesting how it's often the most passionate are the mature aged. And of course in the Australian environment, a mature aged student is someone over 21. But someone who hasn't just gone, I finished school, I must go to university. Someone who's gone off into the world of work and said, I have a calling and I'm going to go back to university. Those people are just remain an absolute delight to teach. And that's when you can see that it really is a chemical reaction. You can feed off their passion, their love, and they feed off yours.